Welcome back to Lexi Mind. This is the channel where books meet language learning. Today we're diving into an absolute classic psychological thriller, Fyodor Dostoevsky's masterpiece, Crime and Punishment. We're going to explore the dark, twisting corridors of the human mind. And hey, make sure to stick around until the very end because I've got a specially designed, screenshot-friendly B1 vocabulary lesson waiting for you, based entirely on the story we're about to uncover. Let's get into it.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We've got 5 simple parts. First, the deadly plan. Second, guilt and paranoia. Third, confession and redemption. Then we'll do a quick book analysis on the core themes, and finally wrap up with our B1 vocabulary lesson.
All right, kicking things off with part 1, the deadly plan.
Picture this. It's the stifling summer heat of St. Petersburg, Russia. Our main guy is Rodion Raskolnikov, a destitute former law student. He's living in absolute extreme poverty in this cramped, tiny room, constantly hiding from his landlady because he just can't pay the rent. In fact, months prior, things got so bad he had to drop out of school entirely. Cut to just days before the main event. In pure desperation, he visits this miserable old pawnbroker, Alyona Ivanovna, to pawn his watch. But here's the thing, he's not just there for the cash. He's secretly studying her apartment, rehearsing a terrible plan that actually fills him with dread. Then comes the real catalyst. Just one day prior, he's in the Haymarket and accidentally overhears that the pawnbroker's sister, Lizaveta, is going to be away from home. The old woman will be completely alone. He takes this as some sort of twisted sign from fate. So, on the night of the crime, he literally sews a loop inside his coat to hide an axe, goes over there, and brutally murders the pawnbroker. But then, the gentle sister, Lizaveta, unexpectedly walks in, he totally panics, and he kills her too.
Now, you might be wondering, how in the world does a former law student justify doing something so horrific? Well, before the murder, Raskolnikov overheard a student in a tavern arguing this really dangerous idea, that killing this hoarding, wretched old pawnbroker and using her money for good would actually benefit humanity. He latches onto this. He completely adopts this exact idea to wrongly justify his violent crime to himself. He genuinely tries to believe he's doing the world a favor.
But as we all know, actions have consequences. This brings us to Section 2, Guilt and Paranoia.
Almost immediately after he narrowly escapes the crime scene, the brutal reality hits him like a ton of bricks. Raskolnikov's mind just starts to fracture. He starts acting completely irrationally. He hides the stolen items and the cash under a rock in a courtyard without even looking at what he took. Then, the intense guilt hits him so hard he plunges into a severe, days-long physical fever. A bit later, he gets called into the police station for an entirely unrelated unpaid debt. While he's there, he overhears some officers talking about the murders, and he literally almost faints. And honestly, the most tragic part? He violently pushes away everyone who loves him and is just trying to help, like his devoted friend Razumihin and even his own mother and sister.
And right here is where a massive psychological duel begins. Enter Magistrate Porfiry Petrovich. Porfiry doesn't actually have hard physical evidence, but through a series of these really intense, probing conversations, he strongly suspects Raskolnikov is the guy. It turns into this brilliant, tense cat-and-mouse game. Porfiry essentially plays with Raskolnikov's mind. He's just waiting patiently for the immense mental pressure and the paranoia to finally force Raskolnikov to crack and expose himself.
And you know what? That mental pressure does exactly that. Let's move to part 3, confession and redemption.
The heavy, isolating burden of this dark secret just becomes totally unbearable for him. First, desperately needing some sort of human connection, Raskolnikov goes to Sonya. She's a young woman forced into extreme hardship to provide for her family, but she has maintained this incredibly pure, compassionate heart. He finally breaks down and confesses his dark secret to her. But here's where it gets terrifying. A manipulative, dangerous man named Svidrigailov, who has actually been pursuing Raskolnikov's sister, recently moved into the room right next door, and he secretly overhears the entire confession through the thin wall. It is unbelievably suspenseful. Ultimately, Sonya compassionately insists that he has to accept his suffering to ever find redemption. So Raskolnikov says a heartbreaking goodbye to his family, walks right into the police station, and formally confesses to the murders.
This leads us to the story's profound epilogue. Raskolnikov gets sentenced to 8 years in a Siberian prison. For the first couple of years, he's completely isolated from the other convicts. He's cold, he's bitter, and he's proudly unrepentant. But Sonya actually follows him to Siberia. She patiently visits him, supporting him no matter what. By year 3, he starts getting tormented by this haunting nightmare he calls the plague dream, where a virus of absolute, fanatical self-righteousness basically destroys all of society. When he wakes up from this feverish nightmare, Sonia's endless compassion finally breaks through. It melts his pride. He has a total emotional collapse right at her feet, and this sparks his slow but very genuine spiritual and moral renewal.
Okay, let's step back from the plot for a second. We're on to part 4, book analysis on core themes. What's the real message here?
The entire tragedy really hinges on this one very dangerous concept, the extraordinary man theory. Before he even committed the murder, Raskolnikov wrote an article arguing this exact belief. The idea is that certain quote-unquote great people, like historical conquerors or leaders, have the moral right to break the law, even commit murder, if it serves the greater progress of humanity. He arrogantly convinced himself that he was one of these extraordinary men. But as the events of the book clearly prove, this mindset does not lead to greatness. It only leads to immense suffering, isolation, and total destruction.
We can really lock in the ultimate lesson of this book by contrasting 2 key characters. On one side, we have Svidrigailov. He represents arrogant isolation and totally amoral behavior. He just does whatever he wants, completely ignoring the rules. And where does that lead him? Right into terrifying nightmares, utter despair, and finally suicide. On the other side, we have Sonia. She represents self-sacrifice, deep compassion for others, and enduring faith. Her path leads to love and redemption. Dostoevsky is basically showing us that selfish isolation will absolutely destroy us, while human connection and compassion are what save us.
And that brings us to part 5. Welcome, language learners, to our B1 vocabulary lesson.
Welcome to the LexiMind Language Lab. If you're an intermediate English learner or you just want to expand your descriptive vocabulary, I want you to get your screenshot buttons ready right now. We are going to review 8 essential words that we just used to summarize today's incredible story.
Okay, here is our first table. Go ahead and take your screenshot now. Let's read through these together clearly. Number 1 is poverty. This means being extremely poor. For example, Raskolnikov lived in terrible poverty. Number 2 is confess. To confess means to admit you did something bad. Example, he decided to confess his crime. Number 3 is suspicion. This is a feeling or thought that someone is guilty of something. Example, his strange behavior caused suspicion. And number 4 is compassion. This means sympathy and caring for others' suffering. For example, Sonia showed great compassion.
All right, let's move to our next set of words. This is another perfect screenshot opportunity for your notes, so grab it. Number 5 is torment. This means severe mental or physical suffering. Example, guilt began to torment him. Number 6 is provoke. To provoke means to deliberately cause a reaction or anger in someone. Example, Raskolnikov tried to provoke Lushin. Number 7 is redemption. This is the act of being saved from evil or error. Example, he found redemption in Siberia. And finally, number 8 is justify. To justify means to try to prove that something is right or reasonable. Example, he tried to justify the murder. Just look at how perfectly these terms describe Dostoevsky's grand themes.
As we wrap up today's explainer on crime and punishment, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought that sits right at the heart of Raskolnikov's struggle. Can bad actions ever truly be justified if the result is good? I really want to hear what you think about this. Dive into the comments below and challenge yourself to answer this question using at least 2 of the 8 new vocabulary words we learned today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you for the next explainer on LexiMind.